Topic here is the talk. So, for the most part, you're going to be asked to play the role of a parent and respond to your child when he or she comes home with a couple of issues. So, the first case we're going to look at is W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the founding members of the NAACP. In 1903, he wrote his piece on our spiritual strivings. He talks about an exchange of a card exchange with the girl, and the girl refuses his card. She gives him a glance, and then at that particular moment, he realized that he's different from others. He would later go on to identify this as what he calls double consciousness, the idea of having a two-ness in America, that there means something to be an American, but there's something that means an African American. And it is at this particular point that he realizes that. So if you're his parent, what would you say when he comes home and talks about this exchange? He would then later go on to talk in that same piece about people approaching him in a half-hesitant sort of way, eyeing him curiously and compassionately. And then instead of saying directly, how does it feel to be a problem? So they're indirectly saying that he's a problem. So how do they go about doing this? Well, according to Du Bois, he says that they'll say things like, I fought at Mechanicsville, or do not these Southern outrages make your blood boil? So this might be similar to somebody saying something like, I have a lot of gay friends, or, my best friend is black, or something along those lines. It's an idea of comfort. And so by pointing out the difference, this creates yet another situation where double consciousness comes into play for Du Bois. King. So in this situation, this is from King's letter, Birmingham Jail, 1963, and here he talks about Funtown being closed. So on the next slide, you see a group of children that are trying to get into Funtown, and if you're the parent, how would you explain to this girl why she is not allowed into Funtown? So this is precisely what I want you to think about, being a parent and how you would respond to that situation. King would later go on to talk about the situation and say, as a result of these exchanges brought on by segregation and the tension between black and white, there would be different responses. So I believe he identifies 3 responses here. He says that some have adjusted to segregation. They have probably learned helpless. Some people are profiting by segregation. Like if you own a black restaurant, segregation actually works to your advantage. And then he talks about another group that develops a bitterness and hatred and anger, distrust for everything white, similar to what Du Bois had talked about, these same responses. So here they're outlining some of the responses that people would have. And you have to think, you could be any group at this point. You could be a Muslim in America, a gay American, a lesbian in 1960, and you're going to find some people that will adjust to the abuse and some people that will respond with anger and hatred. Because remember, everybody's different. Here is from Du Bois, where he talks about double consciousness. I already addressed this point. I didn't realize I had some of the text there. And he would talk about the same response. So Du Bois talks about how when he recognized that he was different, that he developed a mocking distrust of everything white. So as a parent, how would you deal with that? What about this situation here, the Weathered Underground? Now I'm just getting into a couple of other ideas here. So the Weathered Underground was an organization in the 70s that was an all-white organization that wanted to end racial injustice in America. It's interesting that they were believers in white privilege. Definitely would not label these individuals racist, as they wanted to use their skin color as a way to commit terrorist attacks against the United States. Let's see, if you are a Asian American, talking about here the hyphen in between the Asian American. What does it mean to be an Asian American? What does it mean to be an American Asian? Are the two things different? Dylan Roof. What about Dylan Roof? He is the shooter who went into a black church, killed 9 churchgoers. What do you do if you're a white American and your kid comes home and says that he was called a ignorant racist? What would you say in that moment? Or simply because the individual is white, they are not allowed to have such comparable feelings. At the end, are we talking about human beings, or are we talking about People respond in different situations, and we're not going to give people any leeway. So for Dylan Roof, if you're not familiar with the story, he wrote his manifesto, and he talked about his anger. So that anger that Dubois talks about is also anger that maybe Dylan Roof was feeling. Not saying that that justifies his horrific act, but it's about the feeling that he felt that he was discriminated against, and that in his mind he was justified in doing what he was doing. So my question here is, how are you going to respond when the question comes up? You could be a Muslim American, a gay American, you could be a white American, an Asian American, African American, whatever. You pick and you write your response.